The Galactic jail was an enormous, darkened hive of steel and concrete, layered with the faint hum of distant power systems. Lights cast harsh glows across thick, metal walls lined with alien technology, flickering over the cells in rhythmic pulses. Every corridor seemed to throb with a cold, unwelcoming energy, pulsing in time with the muted sounds of alien inmates, a low murmur of hostile tones and rough laughter that hinted at countless plots and rivalries. Everywhere, unfamiliar smells mixed with the scent of metal, oil, and tension, creating an atmosphere thick with hostility. The alien factions kept to themselves, each group claiming specific corners of the prison's echoing halls. There were the Zlorths, a hulking reptilian race with scaly, armor-like skin and thick claws that scraped ominously along the ground. They moved as a single, silent unit, their yellow eyes watching everything with an unsettling, predatory intensity. Across from them lounged the Vree, spindly creatures with elongated limbs and dark, color-shifting skin, constantly flickering to blend into their surroundings. The Vree prided themselves on stealth, deception, and cunning, and they exuded a smug confidence that only irritated the larger, less agile species around them. Nearby were the Thraxians, massive and brute-like, with bulging muscles and horns that curled from their foreheads, each one heavily scarred from battles fought both in and out of prison walls. A loud, grinding noise announced the opening of the heavy metal doors, and all heads turned to see the human as they were marched into the cell block. The guards left quickly, leaving the human alone under the scrutinizing eyes of the alien gangs. The human was unarmed, unassuming in appearance, and seemed to draw little more than sneers from the larger creatures. To them, this human was nothing more than a fragile, barely evolved creature who posed no real threat. The Zlorths watched the human with detached amusement, muttering among themselves in their guttural language, dismissing the newcomer before he even taken 2 steps inside. The Vree let out sharp, mocking laughs, some of them whispering and pointing as their colors shifted in rippling patterns. But it was the Thraxians who openly moved in, their interest piqued by the idea of a new target to break down. One of the Thraxians, a particularly large and scarred alien, stood up and made a show of stretching his thick arms, his eyes fixed intently on the human. Unbothered by the attention, the human scanned his surroundings, taking in each gang and their chosen spaces. He noted the proximity of exits, the subtle shifts in the group's territorial boundaries, and the dynamics between them. His expression remained unreadable, calm, as he sized up each alien faction in turn, his eyes resting a moment longer on the Thraxians, who seemed the most eager to start trouble. The Thraxian leader made his approach, towering over the human and smirking as his gang members gathered around to watch. "Look what we have here, an easy snack," he sneered, drawing a few chuckles from his companions. He leaned in close, flexing his powerful arms and emphasizing his size, trying to provoke a reaction. "You lost, human? Thought they'd send you to a daycare, not a prison?" His words, laced with mockery, were meant to test the human, to see if he'd flinch or cower. But the human's expression remained steady. He simply looked up at the Thraxian, his gaze steady and unshaken. The Thraxian blinked, momentarily thrown off by the lack of reaction. This quiet defiance earned a few curious glances from the other inmates, some of whom had never seen anyone, especially a human, remain so unperturbed in the face of a direct threat. After a beat, the Thraxian scowled, not used to being ignored. He took a step closer, his broad, armored shoulders blocking out the light as he loomed over the human. "Not so tough now, are you? You're in our space now, and I suggest you show respect. Or we'll teach you some manners." The human's gaze shifted slowly, meeting the Thraxian's eyes directly, his calm and unflinching. His silence stretched uncomfortably, an unexpected response that left the Thraxian momentarily unsure of how to proceed. It wasn't a display of fear, it was the opposite, a quiet, steady presence that unsettled the aliens' gang just enough to bring their taunts to a halt. The rest of the cell block watched closely, curious to see the human's reaction, or lack of it. A few aliens exchanged surprised glances, not used to seeing their most aggressive residents put off so quickly. The Thraxian leader shifted uncomfortably, and for the briefest moment, it seemed as if he might back off, unsettled by this unexpected display of calm from such an unlikely source. Instead, he decided to push further, perhaps in an attempt to save face. With a sneer, he raised a clawed hand, intending to shove the human back and assert his dominance. But before he could even extend his arm, the human moved, shifting slightly to the side, effortlessly avoiding the push and remaining firmly in place. The subtle dodge seemed to shock the Thraxian, his hand hovering awkwardly in the air where the human had been. The human's gaze remained steady, as if he'd anticipated the move all along. This time, the watching inmates murmured in genuine surprise. The human hadn't retaliated or lashed out. He'd simply moved in a way that conveyed complete control, a refusal to be intimidated that the Thraxian couldn't quite process. Realizing he'd been subtly bested, the Thraxian grumbled something under his breath, backing off with a frustrated glare. His gang members muttered in confusion, clearly wondering why he hadn't escalated, but even they sensed that something unusual had just happened. The human finally moved, calmly turning away from the Thraxian and surveying the rest of the room, unbothered by the confrontation. He took his time, walking with a quiet, unassuming confidence, as if he belonged here just as much as any of them. The other gangs watched him with newfound interest, some with grudging respect, others with wary curiosity. Even the Vri, typically aloof and unimpressed, exchanged curious glances, taking note of the human's unshakable demeanor. As the human settled into a corner of the cell block, some of the inmates continued to eye him, their earlier assumptions beginning to fray. The human may have seemed out of place, even vulnerable at first, but now there was something about him, a quiet strength, that couldn't be ignored. In this prison, where might ruled over reason, the human's calm defiance left an undeniable mark, a ripple of change that would not go unnoticed by the powerful alien gangs watching his every move. Word of the human's indifference toward the Thraxian gang leader spread quickly through the prison. Intrigued, some inmates watched from a distance, while others whispered, doubtful that any unarmed human could last long against the aggressive alien gangs. Soon enough, another gang, known for using mind games and intimidation, decided to step in and test the human. They were smaller and swifter than the Thraxians, more nimble with sharp, insectoid limbs and compound eyes that betrayed no hint of empathy. This time, 3 of them cornered the human near one of the communal areas. They clicked and buzzed at him, their faces expressionless but voices laced with contempt. "Lost, human?" one of them hissed, inching closer. "Thought you could stroll through here without showing respect?" Another added. "You've made yourself quite the curiosity, standing up to the Thraxians like that." Their thin arms flexed menacingly as they began to close in, expecting fear or pleading. The human looked at them with a faint, unimpressed smile and crossed his arms, simply watching as they advanced. "Respect?" he replied, his voice calm. "Funny, I thought that was earned, not demanded." The aliens paused, unsure of what to make of this. One of them jabbed a clawed finger toward him, their irritation growing. "You think we're here to discuss terms with you? You'll learn your place, one way or another." Still, the human remained calm, watching them with an almost casual curiosity. "If you're trying to scare me," he said dryly, "you're going to need to do a lot better than that." This quiet confidence made the gang even more irritated. One of them reached out to shove the human, clearly intending to knock him off balance. But the moment his clawed hand came near, the human moved. With a single fluid step, he sidestepped the alien's strike, using the attacker's momentum to guide him forward and off balance, sending him stumbling with little more than a well-timed nudge. The remaining 2 attackers blinked, momentarily startled by the ease with which the human had evaded their partner. The human's eyes remained calm, but now there was an undeniable sharpness there, a warning that none of them had expected. "Careful," he said in a measured tone. "Someone might get hurt." The stumbling alien hissed in frustration, turning with a vicious swipe, but the human was faster. This time, he ducked under the alien's arm, pivoting with a quickness and precision that seemed almost rehearsed. Without warning, he struck out with a sharp jab to an area just below the alien's torso, a well-placed strike that left the alien groaning and sinking to the floor. The other 2 watched in disbelief, momentarily frozen as their comrade lay gasping on the ground. A few nearby inmates, including some of the Vrian's Lorths, had noticed the commotion and were now watching with newfound interest. They had expected the human to either submit or be quickly overpowered, but this was something else entirely. Seeing their companion down, the two remaining aliens exchanged uncertain glances. They tightened their stance, lowering themselves to try and overpower him with a coordinated attack. But the human simply adjusted his posture, standing poised and ready. His movements were steady, his focus unbreakable, like he was accustomed to handling threats far more dangerous than this. With a sudden signal, the two aliens lunged at him in unison. But the human sidestepped again, letting one of them pass while grabbing the other's outstretched arm and twisting it into a lock. Before the alien could react, he was down, pinned with little more than a precise grip and controlled force. The other alien, now alone and clearly outmatched, hesitated. He took a step back, uncertain, as his two allies lay groaning on the floor. The entire exchange had taken mere moments, but the effect was undeniable. The watching inmates fell silent, their eyes on the human, who stood calmly as if nothing unusual had happened. The alien who'd backed off spat angrily, glaring at the human. "You'll regret this, human. We'll make sure of it." The human raised an eyebrow, a slight smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're welcome to try," he replied calmly, his voice even. "But you might want to rethink that strategy." The alien hesitated again, his bravado fading as the human's words sank in. He turned and slinked away, leaving his injured comrades to limp back to their corner. The inmates who had watched the confrontation exchanged looks of surprise and respect. Even those who had dismissed the human initially now viewed him with a new level of interest, reassessing their assumptions. The prison's atmosphere had shifted. Word of the human's resilience spread like wildfire, and the realization dawned on the other inmates that this human was more than he seemed. Where they had expected weakness, they found control. Where they had anticipated fear, they encountered calm. And where they had assumed helplessness, they discovered skill. The Zlorths exchanged wary glances, while the Thraxians watched from afar, their leader scowling in irritation. The human, unarmed and alone, had managed to disrupt the power dynamics in a single confrontation, and the prison's gangs were forced to reconsider their views. It was clear now that he wasn't the easy target they'd hoped for, and that only made them more cautious. The human's display left an impression, not just on his aggressors but on the wider prison population. Some watched with grudging admiration, others with silent respect. Even those who had been indifferent before now took notice, aware that this human had done something few inmates could manage. He had faced down an alien gang and emerged unscathed. As the last of his assailants limped away, the human finally relaxed, glancing around at the silent onlookers. The tension was palpable, but he simply nodded to himself, as if satisfied. In a place where survival was earned through brute strength or intimidation, the human had achieved a victory of a different kind, one that left his adversaries shaken and the rest of the prison watching, quietly intrigued by this unexpected force among them. After the showdown with the gang, the prison's atmosphere shifted subtly around the human. They moved through the corridors, calm and steady, and some of the other inmates began to see them in a new light. A few of the quieter, more isolated inmates, smaller aliens or those who hadn't found their footing among the larger factions, started to approach. These aliens weren't warriors or strategists. They were either low in the prison hierarchy or simply looking for a way to survive without constantly looking over their shoulders. Intrigued or sensing an opportunity, they cautiously made their presence known, lingering nearby or offering small acknowledgments. One of the first to approach was a short, spindly alien with a thin, pale exoskeleton and large, blinking eyes that seemed too wide for his head. He introduced himself with a shy nod. "My name is Galactic," he whispered, his voice like a nervous hum. "I saw what you did with the gang. Not many stand up to them, let alone walk away afterward." His tone was respectful, his gaze fixed on the human with a mix of admiration and hope. The human looked Galactic over, sensing his genuine fear but also his determination. "Sticking together isn't a bad idea in a place like this," the human replied calmly. You interested? Jalak nodded quickly, and soon, a few others joined as well, 2 or 3 at first, then a few more. Some were timid, wary of trusting anyone, while others were eager to belong to something stronger than themselves. Each of them had something to offer, and the human took careful note of their unique abilities and personalities. Before long, this small group became a team, one that others began to notice and occasionally seek out for quiet guidance or protection. The human wasted no time in preparing them for what would inevitably come next. Knowing that the alien gangs wouldn't let the earlier incident go unchallenged, the human began laying out basic strategies, encouraging each of the group members to learn how to watch each other's backs, remain alert, and stay mobile. There was no pretense of becoming warriors, but instead, the focus was on resourcefulness and how to handle situations with calm and precision. The human understood the dynamics at play here: strength in numbers, trust in unity, and the element of surprise. One evening, as the group gathered in a quieter corner of the prison's recreation area, the humans shared a piece of advice that caught them by surprise. In a place like this, the human said, knowing when not to fight is just as important as knowing how to defend yourself. They expect aggression and fear. They don't know how to deal with strategy and restraint. The group listened intently, absorbing the wisdom. It was clear that the human wasn't just a brawler but someone with a deeper understanding of power and survival. Trust began to grow between the human and the others, slowly but surely. One day, a young alien who struggled with basic physical tasks due to his frail build was struggling to carry a load of supplies. Without hesitation, the human stepped in, helping him complete the task without drawing attention. The alien, surprised, expressed his gratitude with a quick, awkward nod. "Thank you," he murmured, his antennae twitching with relief. The human just nodded back, unbothered, creating an air of mutual respect that the alien wasn't used to in the prison's harsh environment. Word of the humans' group spread, and as the alliances formed, the main gang that had originally tried to intimidate the human took note. They saw the group as a growing threat, a challenge to their control over the other inmates. Driven by a need to reassert their dominance, the gang began plotting a coordinated attack to dismantle the humans' influence and intimidate anyone considering joining them. There were muttered plans, whispered meetings in darkened corners, and smug nods as they prepared to ambush the humans' group during an unguarded moment. But the human, anticipating this move, had already set countermeasures in place. In the hours leading up to the anticipated assault, the human and their allies prepared quietly, setting up diversions and small but effective traps using whatever limited resources were available. It wasn't about brute force. It was about creating obstacles and distractions, forcing the gang into a more challenging position than they expected. When the time came, the gang moved in, expecting an easy show of dominance. But they quickly found themselves ensnared in carefully placed traps, with sections of the prison floor littered with makeshift barricades and simple trip wires. Shadows flitted past them, and their vision was disrupted by reflective surfaces the human had positioned to obscure their line of sight. Their frustration grew as they tried to regroup, realizing that they were facing more resistance than they had anticipated. In the midst of the chaos, the humans' group moved quickly and efficiently, staying just out of reach, regrouping in small teams, and evading the gang's direct line of attack. The human orchestrated their movements, guiding them with calm instructions and helping them stay one step ahead of their pursuers. The gang, disoriented and out of patience, found themselves scattered, unable to catch even a single member of the humans' group. Eventually, realizing they were outmaneuvered, the gang pulled back, hissing threats and vowing vengeance. But their failure had been witnessed by others in the prison who had watched the confrontation unfold, murmuring in surprise and admiration. The human and their group had managed to stand against one of the prison's most intimidating gangs, not through brute force, but through wit and preparation. In the aftermath, the humans' allies gathered together, some still catching their breath, others quietly celebrating their success. There was a new sense of solidarity between them, a shared confidence that they had never felt before. They looked at the human with genuine respect, understanding that their victory had been a result of strategy and resilience rather than raw strength. The human, though quietly pleased with the outcome, simply nodded, encouraging the group to keep their guard up. "They'll come back," the human said, voice calm but firm. "But now they know we're not easy targets. We'll need to stay sharp." The others nodded, their expressions determined. For the first time, they felt empowered, aware that they were capable of standing up against forces much larger than themselves. Around them, other prisoners had noticed too, some with respect, others with suspicion. The humans' influence was undeniable, and while it had drawn the attention of powerful enemies, it had also earned them the trust and admiration of many who, until now, had only known survival as a solitary, unending struggle. The tension in the prison simmered as the alien gang, infuriated by their earlier failure, prepared a final, all-out assault against the human and their allies. They gathered in the shadows, their intent unmistakable. This time, they would crush this human upstart and everyone aligned with them. Rumors of their impending attack swept through the prison, and other inmates watched with bated breath, anticipating an inevitable, brutal confrontation. The gang's leader, seething with anger, was determined to end the humans' influence once and for all. The humans group, however, was prepared. Over the past days, they'd worked quietly and efficiently, reinforcing their position with makeshift defenses and carefully hidden traps. They moved through the corridors with purpose, setting up each device with precision and timing, guided by the humans' calm leadership. To the untrained eye, nothing seemed amiss, but every corner, every choke point, had been planned with surgical accuracy. They knew the gang would come, and they were ready. When the gang finally made their move, it was swift and ferocious. They flooded the corridors leading to the human section of the prison, assuming that overwhelming numbers and brute force would carry them through. But as soon as they crossed the entry points, the first line of traps activated. Small but effective devices scattered the gang, creating a wave of confusion. Sharp fragments sprayed into their path, forcing them to slow down and scatter to avoid the unexpected hazards. Shouts of frustration echoed as they stumbled, struggling to regroup. Meanwhile, the humans group held their positions, executing the plan with calm efficiency. They didn't need to face the attackers head-on. They used the prison's narrow corridors and tight spaces to their advantage, staying mobile and precise. Each of them moved with purpose, springing traps or luring attackers into areas where their numbers became a disadvantage. The human had drilled them on these maneuvers, teaching them to work as a unit, anticipating each other's movements. In the midst of the chaos, the human remained a steady presence, assessing the situation with quick, sharp glances and issuing commands with quiet authority. Every time the gang shifted their approach, the human adapted, leading their allies to reposition or creating distractions that kept the gang off balance. One of the gang members managed to break through the traps and lunge toward the human, teeth bared in fury, but the human sidestepped, redirecting the alien's momentum and sending him crashing into a wall. The attackers were powerful, but they couldn't keep up with the human's agility and control. The gang leader, enraged and desperate, yelled at his followers to push forward. But by now, the attackers were splintered, their morale faltering as more of their own fell victim to the traps and diversions. The humans group fought back without mercy, using everything they had been taught to maintain the upper hand. They weren't just defending themselves, they were dismantling the gang's offensive, piece by piece. The human moved through the battlefield with swift, calculated steps, directing his allies like pieces on a chessboard, each move intended to frustrate and disorient their enemies. It wasn't long before the gang's confidence began to wane. One by one, their members fell back, bruised and humiliated, their initial fury replaced by a growing sense of dread. They had expected an easy victory, but they'd walked right into a trap of their own making. Now, scattered and confused, they were no longer an organized force but a collection of isolated, desperate individuals. Some of them tried to regroup, but each attempt was met with another setback, as the humans group anticipated their moves and countered every attack with precision. Finally, as their numbers dwindled and their leader realized the battle was lost, the gang began to retreat, their arrogance shattered. Their retreat was clumsy and panicked, a far cry from the overwhelming force they'd once projected. They limped away, bruised and broken, casting fearful glances back at the humans group, who stood victorious and unfazed. The other inmates, who had watched from a distance, could barely believe what they'd witnessed. The gang, once the most feared group in the prison, had been defeated decisively, not by brute strength, but by strategy, coordination, and adaptability. The human had turned the prison's brutal power structure on its head, proving that skill and wit could stand up against even the most formidable opponents. As the gang retreated, the human and their allies gathered, sharing nods of acknowledgement and a sense of hard-earned camaraderie. They had done more than just survive, they had changed the prison's dynamics in a single, decisive stroke. Around them, the watching inmates whispered, casting glances at the human with a mixture of respect and awe. The human's influence had transformed not only their small group but the entire power balance within the prison. With the gang's defeat, the human had sent a clear message: strength alone wasn't enough to control this place. In the end, it was intelligence, resilience, and cooperation that had won the day. The once dominant gang was left humbled, their influence shattered, and the human stood as a powerful new force in the prison, one that others would respect, not out of fear, but out of admiration for their skill and adaptability. In the days following the final showdown, a noticeable shift permeated the prison. Where once there had been glares of disdain or casual indifference, the human now received nods of respect and even the occasional murmur of admiration from the other inmates. Word of the human's victory spread quickly, reshaping the atmosphere. The dominant gangs, once united by their shared sense of superiority, now regarded the human with caution. Those who had mocked humanity's supposed frailty had been forced to acknowledge something new, something they hadn't anticipated. The alien gang that had once terrorized the prison kept their distance, humiliated and wary. They slinked through the corridors, visibly subdued, shooting quick glances at the human, as though measuring their next move with trepidation. Their bravado had melted away, replaced by hesitation. For the first time, they understood the consequences of underestimating a human's resilience, and the idea of retribution no longer held the same appeal. Even the most hardened of them now understood that this human wasn't just a body to be broken but a mind that could outthink and outmaneuver. Within the human's newfound circle, allies reflected openly on the skills they'd seen in action. Jalik, the small, spindly alien who had been one of the first to join, approached with his head tilted in quiet contemplation. You showed us something human," he began, his voice respectful and thoughtful. "It's not about brute force, is it? You humans, you fight with your mind just as much as your fists." His large eyes blinked, almost in wonder. Another inmate chimed in, an alien with thick, scaled skin and a voice that carried like gravel. "I thought humans were, well, I thought you'd be torn apart. But you made us realize there's strength in the way you think, the way you see opportunities where others would only see obstacles." There was a quiet respect in his words, an acknowledgement that his assumptions had been shattered. Others murmured in agreement, nodding as they recalled the human's strategic insights, the calm in the face of adversity, and the unwavering determination. What had once seemed like mere bravado had turned out to be a keen, adaptive intelligence that valued both unity and resilience. The human's allies felt something unexpected: pride. They felt proud to have stood beside someone who didn't rely solely on power, who instead harnessed intellect, innovation, and a fearless spirit to carve out a place in the harshest of environments. The human took a moment to absorb their words, thinking back on the journey that had brought them here. There had been no roadmap for this place, no blueprint for survival. What had worked back on Earth didn't always translate to a galactic prison full of beings who were stronger or faster, who possessed abilities and advantages that humanity didn't. But humans had something else: a gift for adaptation, a knack for observing, learning, and applying knowledge in unexpected ways. Where others saw walls, humans saw footholds. And in a place where might often won, the human had shown that there was another path to strength. In a quiet moment, away from the murmuring allies and respectful stares, the human allowed a small, subtle smile. They had done more than just survive, they'd changed things here. They had defied expectations, broken down prejudices, and in doing so, had shown a glimpse of what humanity was truly capable of. They felt a sense of pride, not for themselves alone, but for their species. Humanity had a strength beyond what others could measure, one that lay not only in physical endurance but in a relentless spirit and boundless creativity. Reflecting on the journey, the human realized that this experience had been more than a fight for survival. It had been a testament to humanity's place in a vast, often unforgiving galaxy. They had proven that while humans might be smaller, weaker, or even considered inferior by other species, they possessed a unique resilience, an indomitable will that refused to break even in the face of overwhelming odds. As they moved through the prison now, the human walked with calm assurance, carrying a silent understanding of what they'd accomplished. They'd shown that humanity wasn't defined by its limitations but by the way it adapted, endured, and overcame. And with each nod from a fellow inmate, with each respectful glance from former skeptics, they knew they had earned their place here. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the human felt ready, knowing that their actions had left a mark that would not be easily erased. They'd shown the galaxy what humanity was made of, not just flesh and bone, but of minds that could think beyond the immediate, of spirits that could rise against any challenge. In the quiet solitude of their own thoughts, they knew that their journey here had only begun. And so, they stood, a single human among many species, yet somehow transcending their own physical form. They'd proven that humanity's true strength wasn't bound by muscle or weaponry but by the power of their mind and spirit, traits that no prison walls could contain, no gang could break, and no alien species could truly understand, until now.